Well, welcome everybody. This is part 4 of GM Junior's Scouting Fantasy Podcast. First one of the year, first one ever. It's me, Russ Landy, with our expert guru, which he doesn't like to be called, Scott Bischoff. We've talked about quarterbacks. We've talked about running backs. Now we're going to take a quick peek at some of the receivers we're interested in seeing this year. I think one guy, because you look at last week, we saw Andrew Luck gets the huge contract. Obviously, T.Y. Hilton's there. Well, Donte Moncrief, can this guy blossom this year and become really that number 2 guy who catches 80, 90 balls, can score 10 or 12 touchdowns? That's the big debate. I think when you look at him, you don't know if Philip Dorsett is going to really emerge this year. Is Moncrief going to be able to hold on to that second job? I think there's a chance he has a dynamic year, a big year, because he's a thick-bodied kid. He's got natural hands. He runs strong routes. But the question to me is he going to have enough to hold off and really be the guy number 2 all year? Or are he and Dorsett going to share that 2-3 role? Because if they share the role, not nearly as valuable. He has to win that job outright, be the number 2 for you to get excited about him during the season.
Yeah, and looking at just the physical dimensions of these guys, I would say that Dorsett's more of a threat to T.Y. Hilton than he is to Moncrief. Moncrief's 6'4" and 220 in that range, and Dorsett and T.Y. Hilton, they're midgets. They're lightning rods. They're so fast. Where Moncrief, I think, has more nuance and subtlety in his route running. T.Y. and Dorsett are just burners who are going to run past you, whether it's to the post or they're so fast and so quick that they create separation because of their athleticism, where I think Moncrief creates it because he's a naturally gifted route runner. My issue with Moncrief, and it's not such an issue because it's all across the board. What happens when Andrew Luck gets hurt, if he gets hurt? What's Moncrief's value? Now, last year he had...
There isn't much, because that offense came to it wasn't doing well with Andrew.
Yeah.
Because he was hurt and wasn't playing well. And then with Hasselbeck, although they won some games, it was not a high-powered offense. So I will tell you, if Andrew does not play better, then Moncrief is not a great choice. And that's why, to me, he's not a frontline early selection in the draft, because I really think that you don't know what his role is going to be. Is he going to be 2? Is he going to be 3? And you don't know if Andrew's going to play better this year, because, to me, they have a marginal offensive line. So that's a very risky player to take too high in the draft. Whereas, to me, Keenan Allen, the Chargers, a slam dunk, high pick in the draft. If you look at what he did the first 8 weeks last year, he was on the verge of setting records all around football. Probably would have finished as one of the top 5 or 6 statistical receivers in the whole league had he stayed healthy. I think this year, another year working with Phillip Rivers. Now not only Antonio Gates, but Hunter Henry, their second-round pick, who they really think can be an impact guy as a rookie, another guy to throw to. It's going to open things up for Keenan Allen. I really think he's going to have a giant year. I think he's going to finish amongst the league leaders in touchdowns and catches. I don't think his yards is going to be as high because he's not a dynamic guy after the catch. But I think catching the ball and making plays in the red zone, this is a guy you want to have.
Absolutely. And so back to Moncrief just for a second. Moncrief is going as wide receiver 32. So it's not like you have to pay a premium a starter's position. I mean, he's going as wide receiver 3. And to me, his ceiling is so high that it's almost like, okay, yeah, you pay that price, right? We brought up a lot of points, good and bad, for Moncrief. I would just close it with last year he had 600 plus yards and 6 touchdowns in that absolute disaster of an offense. Right. So, another year in the system, if Andrew Luck stays healthy and they get that offense rolling, you can fully understand why people are really excited about him. And that's where the excitement comes from. Now with Keenan Allen, it's almost like we don't need to see anymore. We know what he can do. We know how much volume there is in him with him in that passing game. We know that Phillip Rivers loves him. We know that he's a very polished guy. You're right. He's not super athletic. He's not Antonio Brown. But the things that he does incredibly well. I think you're looking at a guy who could potentially lead the league in catches because of the sheer volume of it. He is being drafted as a number 1 wide receiver. So the question then becomes is if you have to draft him as a number one, where can he finish as a number one to make that draft, to make it worthwhile drafting him? And I don't think it's out of the question to see him as a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL this coming season. I do not think and Jordy Nelson, yeah, absolutely can. So there is value there, even though you have to pay the price to get him. He's going as pick 22 overall, which is high. But can he outperform that? He sure can. Again, tied to Phillip Rivers and tied to his own health. He's had his own issues staying healthy, some weird stuff. But as talented as a guy as there is, he catches the ball really well. They use him perfectly for what his skill set is. You know more than anybody does about what San Diego likes to do. They don't ask him to do things he can't do, but they sure ask him to do the things that he does well. I mean, those are things
I just look at. There's no downside with him other than staying healthy. I think if you want a guy who's going to catch 80 to 100 balls, 10 to 15 touchdowns, and he's going to catch balls every week, he's going to catch 6 at least. He's never going to be a guy that has 9 one week and 1 the next week.
Yeah.
To me, he's an easy guy. And the great thing about him is if you have a team with a few guys who are sort of either boom or bust guys, this is a guy you want because every week worst case you're getting 6 for 75 every single week and probably touchdown every other week. That guy helps your team because he's consistent and he's also putting up big numbers over the course of the season. Yeah. Whereas to me, the next guy, there's some similarities. He's a little bigger than Keenan, but there's some similarities in that he's not a speed burner. He's more of a precise route runner, big kid, physical, and that's Laquan Treadwell, the rookie going to the Minnesota Vikings. And I really think, although he's never going to put up Keenan Allen type numbers as a rookie, I think this is a kid that could catch 55, 65 balls and have 8 to 10 touchdowns because he's going to be one of their primary receiving threats. And I think he fits what Teddy Bridgewater needs perfectly, which is a big security blanket receiver. I think he could have a very good rookie season for the Vikings.
I think you nailed it. When I look at rookies, especially receivers, I want to make sure that these guys have clear defined roles. If they don't, and they have to beat somebody who's an established player, it's tough to do for rookies. But Treadwell, I mean, who does he have to beat out to win Mike Wallace? You know what I mean? Really,
it's his job. I mean, it really is.
And the things that he does really well. I mean, we see Teddy Bridgewater become as risk-averse a quarterback as we've seen in a while. It's just he will not put the ball in an area where there's a threat. And with the size of Laquan Treadwell's body and his ability to separate with his body physically, the amount of depth that he gets into the defender's body before he cuts, before he breaks, which he almost takes away the feet of the defender as he's running his route, as he's running through them into them, right? So that the defender has to take a little time to regather himself, and then all of a sudden there's separation. Now that separation doesn't happen down the field all that much, but if you're looking at Teddy Bridgewater wanting to get rid of the ball quick, the short throwing game, a lot of potentially playing Treadwell out of the slot or throwing quick slants where he's open, I could see him catching 60-plus balls like you talked about and being a red zone weapon and being an option in the red zone for I mean, I know they like to go to Peterson, but you still need to have the ability to do something else. So, but again, it's more the concept that if you're drafting a rookie wide receiver, he has to have an absolute path to starting to be able to give you any kind of production whatsoever. And Treadwell's there. It's just, you can't expect Treadwell to go for 80 catches and 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns. It's a little unrealistic. He's being drafted late as wide receiver 41, pick 94. I think that's actually a little high, to be honest. I think when you look around him, there are players like Tyler Lockett and Marvin Jones. Deshaun Jackson's kind of there. Michael Crabtree's there. Travis Benjamin, Willie Snead, Tavon Austin, Torrey Smith. Those are all guys right around where he's getting drafted that I would probably think would be better fantasy players this year than Treadwell. But I can understand why people are doing it. He is a starter. He is realistically their number one option. It's just, what can you expect from a rookie, even in a great situation? It's
Well, I think he's more of a dynasty pick.
Absolutely.
And
No
the same
doubt.
can be said for a Sterling Shepard, but the difference to me is Sterling Shepard, I don't even know if he's ever going to be a quality starter. Whereas Laquan Treadwell, I feel pretty confident a year from now or 2 years from now, he will be a frontline starter that is catching 80 to 100 balls a year, even though he's not going to ever pull away and run away from defenses.
No,
When
I
look
agree
at
with you
Sterling
totally.
Shepard,
Yeah.
I don't know if he'll ever even be a starter. This is a
Really?
guy that, to me, is he good? I like him. I think he's got the tools to be a starter, but I can't pencil it in. And in addition, you're talking about a team that, to me, offensively, major question marks. Eli's been very inconsistent in recent years. He really came on at times last year with McAdoo as the offensive coordinator, but now he's the head coach, McAdoo. I don't think their offense is going to be nearly as good this year. I don't think Shepard is a guy that I feel is going to really do much this year. I think he's going to be a guy that probably is in that 20 to 30 catch range, and you're not going to really see him blossom probably for another year or two. So to me, he's a guy you want to stay away from this year. Don't see him really contributing much to a fantasy team.
See, now I look at him as a pure dynasty pick, not a guy that I'd be playing this year at all. But when I see what that offense has missed with Victor Cruz not playing, and obviously Odell Beckham Jr. is a whole other animal, but they missed that. They still need that short,
They do, no question.
element, and I think Shepard gives them that. And I'm not saying that he gives them that to the point where Eli starts feeding him more than Beckham, but because of the dynamic of what Beckham does, stretching the field and opening up areas of the offense, I can see a situation where Shepard does catch. We'll disagree a little bit, and it's fine because I think we're both right in some of what we're saying is that I think that he's got the ability to catch a lot more passes, maybe 40, 45 for the season. Still doesn't make him fantasy relevant this year.
Yeah, exactly.
A developmental player in a dynasty format and a player I'd really want early because I think his ability 2 years from now or a year, in 2017, 2018 and moving forward, I think his ability is much better than it is for this season. And I can see him having, an absolute defined role that right now we don't know what it's going to be.
Yep, I agree with that 100%. Well, folks, that wraps up GM Junior Scouting's first ever fantasy football podcast. Thanks to Scott Bischoff. Been with me for a number of years and sort of our he doesn't want to hear guru, but sort of the guy who knows the ins and outs of the fantasy world much better than I do as I focus just on the scouting and I'm still sort of figuring out that fantasy side. But we'll be here every week giving you our rundown on what to expect the coming week, guys that we think may break out. We're going to come back next Wednesday and talk about more fantasy stuff. We're going to talk about more skill position guys. We may even get into a few kickers and a little bit of defense. But obviously, skill position guys are the most important. Those are what win you the championship. So we'll be back next week. Thanks for joining us, and have a great night.